Let me tell you about a guy named David. David is not in trouble. He has never missed a mortgage payment. He doesn't carry credit card debt past its due date. He occasionally bought things he didn't need. Nothing extreme. No luxury cars or gambling habits. Just the normal upgrades that happen when life gets a little more comfortable. The most extravagant thing he bought last year was an espresso machine he researched for 3 weeks. If you met him at a dinner party, you'd think correctly that this is a man who has his life together. That is exactly why you need to hear this. Because between the ages of 24 and 41, David made 9 decisions. Not one was reckless. Not one would have worried his parents or his accountant. They were, by every conventional measure, the responsible things to do. And together, without a single dramatic moment. Those 9 decisions quietly erased somewhere between $260,000 and $340,000 from his life. Not all at once, not in increments so small they never registered. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. The kind of money that disappears into the gap between what you did and what you could have done, and never shows up on any statement, any bill, or any warning from your bank. This is not a story about bad luck. It's an audit. And audits don't care that you meant well. So let's walk through it. If you're like most people who have never technically been in financial trouble, you'll recognize yourself in at least 3 or 4 of these. Not because you are careless. Because these decisions were never designed to feel like decisions. Start with the car. David bought his first new car at 26, a practical sedan with good safety ratings. He told himself it was the smart choice, the reliable choice for a grown man who needs to get to work. A new car loses about 20% of its value in the first 12 months and keeps bleeding every year after. A 3-year-old version, with low mileage, would have cost far less and already absorbed the worst depreciation on someone else's balance sheet. David bought new for times over 16 years. The gap between what he paid and what those vehicles would have cost generally used, invested instead of spent, comes to roughly $70,000. He never felt like he was losing money. He felt like a man taking care of his family by driving something dependable. Now the retirement account. David's employer matched contributions up to 5%. He contributed exactly 5%, not $1 more. For 14 years, even as his salary grew and he got promoted, he felt disciplined. Here's what nobody explains clearly. Money invested in your 20s and 30s has decades to compound. Every dollar you fail to put in during that window isn't just a dollar missing later. It's that dollar plus everything it would have earned, plus everything those earnings would have earned, for 30 or 40 years. Contributing 5% instead of gradually increasing to 12 or 15%, on a salary that grew from $48,000 to $85,000, left roughly $90,000 on the table. David didn't lose that money. He simply never let it exist. Next, the savings account. This one infuriates people because it requires almost no effort to fix and almost nobody fixes it. David kept a $30,000 emergency fund at the same bank he'd used since college, earning a fraction of 1% for 7 years. Meanwhile, accounts designed for exactly this purpose, no risk, fully accessible, have been paying several percentage points more. The difference in interest he never collected is close to $7,000, for the crime of never once comparing rates. The problem was not that David made a terrible choice. The problem was that nobody ever told him this choice mattered. The money was safe. The money was available. Nobody tells you safe and available aren't the same as optimized. Now the workplace. 3 times in his career, David changed jobs. 3 times, he accepted the first number offered. He'd say, half joking, that he's just not a good negotiator, with the same shrug people use for not being a morning person, as if it's a fixed trait. Research consistently shows most people who ask for more get at least some of it, and the ask rarely costs them the job. Salary doesn't just affect one paycheck, it resets the baseline for every future raise and offer. a gap of $6,000 or $7,000 a year, uncorrected and compounded through 3 job changes and 15 years of raises, land you around $60,000 income David never generated. Not because he was worth less, because he never tested what the room would actually say yes to. He weaponized his own good manners against his future self, then the one between love and liability. At 31, David co-signed a car loan for his younger sister. Her credit was thin, and refusing would have felt like betrayal dressed up as financial caution. Family helps family. 18 months later, she lost her job and missed payments. David, legally on the hook, paid off the remaining balance rather than watch his credit get destroyed. $9,000 gone in an afternoon. For a decision that felt like the opposite of recklessness. It felt like love. The system doesn't care which one you meant. Around the same years, David carried a small credit card balance every December and January, smoothing out holiday spending, always paying it off eventually. He told himself it was temporary and manageable. Credit card interest often sits above 20% annually. A few $1,000s carried for a few months each year, repeated across 8 years. Quietly transferred over $6,000 from David's pocket to the bank's, for the privilege of not adjusting his December budget by a few $100s. He wasn't irresponsible, he was normal. And normal is extremely expensive. Insurance is where this gets almost darkly funny. David renewed his auto and home insurance automatically for 10 years. Never comparing, because switching felt like a hassle. Insurers have a quiet, unofficial name for customers like this, the loyalty tax. The extra amount long-tenured customers pay above what a new customer would be quoted for identical coverage. Because inertia is more profitable than any risk calculation. An extra few $100s a year, invisible on any single bill, added up to roughly $7,000. Nobody sent him a letter saying he was being charged more for staying. Nobody has to. Then the form he never filled out. At 33, a co-worker mentioned the company offered disability coverage. David hadn't signed up. It seemed like something that happens to older, unluckier people. 4 years later, a cycling accident left him with a broken leg and 3 months unpaid out of work. No safety net existed because the form sat unsigned in a drawer for 4 years. $16,000 of income simply didn't exist. Not because he couldn't work, but because nobody made him picture a version of himself who couldn't. And the quietest thief of all, lifestyle inflation. When David got his first significant raise, he upgraded his apartment, ordered delivery more often, bought better wine. Nothing extravagant, just a slow creeping elevation of his baseline existence. This is the financial equivalent of carbon monoxide. You don't smell it or see it, you just fall asleep. Every time his income went up, expense rose to meet it, like water filling a container. He felt richer because his couch was softer, but on the balance sheet, he was running on a treadmill that kept speeding up. The amount this costs is impossible to calculate precisely, because it's not a single decision but the absence of one, repeated hundreds of times. It's likely the biggest number on this list. None of these, on their own, would ever appear in a serious conversation about someone's finances. That is what makes them so dangerous. You don't get a warning light on your dashboard when you renew your insurance without comparing. Your bank doesn't send you a notification saying, "You've just lost $7,000 by staying with us." These leaks are silent, and silence is the most profitable sound in the financial industry. Added up, conservatively, between $260,000 and $340,000. The scary part is not that David lost $300,000. The scary part is that David never felt poor. He had a job, he paid his bills, his neighbors thought he was doing fine. And that's exactly why this problem is so difficult to notice. Call it $300,000, that's not the cost of a crisis. David never had a crisis. That's the cost of 9 decisions that each individually sounded like what a responsible adult does. Here's what makes this number so hard to feel. It's almost entirely made of things that didn't happen. It's the interest you didn't earn, the raise you didn't receive, the investment growth that never began. Your brain is built to react to loss. You can see a wallet stolen, a bill that's higher than expected. But opportunity cost is invisible. It doesn't trigger the same alarm, and that is why it quietly outpaces every other form of financial damage in a typical middle-class life. What should unsettle you isn't any single figure. It's that every item is something you've probably done, or doing, or were taught to think of as a virtue. Buying new feels like caring for your family. Contributing exactly the match feels disciplined. Keeping money at the same bank feels stable. Non-negotiating feels humble. Helping a sibling feels like love. Renewing without shopping around feels like loyalty being rewarded. Carrying a balance temporarily feels manageable. None of these look like a gambling addiction or bankruptcy. That's precisely why they're more dangerous. A disaster you can see coming gets defended against. A decision dressed as a virtue never triggers your alarm. Think about the financial blueprint most people inherit without ever questioning it. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, buy a practical car, put money aside, stay loyal to the companies that employs you. Be irresponsible. Do everything the way previous generations did. The problem is not that this blueprint was always wrong. The problem is that the world it was designed for no longer exists. A generation ago, savings accounts actually rewarded patience. Companies often rewarded decades of loyalty. A single income could realistically support a family, and retirement was something many workers could plan for. But the rules changed faster than the advice did, and millions of people are still following an outdated financial map, wondering why they keep arriving at a destination they never wanted. The strange thing about financial decline is that it rarely looks like failure. Most people who struggle financially do not wake up one morning surrounded by bankruptcy papers. They don't necessarily lose everything in one dramatic moment. Instead, wealth disappears quietly. A slightly more expensive car here, a larger mortgage there, a few years of carrying unnecessary debt, a few decisions made because they felt affordable at the time. None of these choices seem dangerous individually. That is exactly why they are dangerous. A person can spend 30 years working hard, earning more money than their parents ever did, and still reach their later years wondering why the freedom they expected never arrived. The answer is usually not one terrible decision. It is thousands of ordinary decisions that slowly redirected money away from building assets and toward maintaining a lifestyle. The money was not stolen. It was exchanged for convenience, for appearances, for temporary comfort, and because each trade seemed reasonable in the moment, the costs remain invisible. This is why understanding money is not about blaming yourself for every decision you made. It is about understanding the system you were operating inside. Once you see where the leaks happen, the solution becomes much less complicated. You don't need a secret investment strategy. You don't need to predict the next market winner. You need to recognize the small choices that quietly determine where your money ends up over decades. Because wealth is rarely destroyed by one dramatic mistake. More often, it disappears through ordinary decisions that nobody thinks to question. The theory isn't complicated. Money that sits idle loses to money put to work. Because growth compounds and stagnation doesn't. Debt on something that loses value works against you twice, in interest and depreciation. Debt on something that grows or earns more than it costs can work for you. Every year you delay investing isn't a neutral pause. It's a year of compounding you permanently lose. Because compounding only runs forward, and the price of comfort staying with the familiar insurer. The familiar bank, the familiar salary you were handed instead of the one you asked for is almost never zero. It's just built silently, a little at a time, to a future version of you who hasn't arrived yet. People talk about compound interest like it's magic, but they rarely mention its twin, compound delay. Every year you wait to start investing, you aren't just missing 1 year of returns. You're missing the final year of compounding, the most powerful one, the one that would have been built on top of every previous year. $1 invested at 25 can grow to more than $15 by 65, assuming a 7% return. That same dollar invested at 35 grows to about $7. The 10 years you waited didn't just cost you the returns from those 10 years. They cost you the doubling at the end. Delay is the most expensive word in finance. So what happens now? The answer is not to stare at the number and convince yourself that everything is already decided. A financial mistake becomes dangerous when it turns into a permanent identity. I'm bad with money. I started too late. I'll never catch up. Those thoughts feel true because they explain the past, but they do nothing for the next decision. David is 41. He did not suddenly transform his finances overnight. He did not discover some secret investment strategy. He simply started fixing the things that were still within his control. He changed insurance providers and saved a few $100s every year. When his next raise arrived, he increased his retirement contribution before his lifestyle had time to adjust. He moved his emergency savings into a higher yield account one afternoon after realizing he had spent 7 years leaving that money untouched. He automated investments after every paycheck because he knew relying on motivation was a losing strategy. And when he received his last job offer, he did something he had never done before. He asked for more. Not aggressively, not with some perfect negotiation script. He simply asked. The room went quiet for a few seconds. Then the company increased the offer. Not every mistake disappeared. Some financial decisions only have one direction, forward. The money spent on the old car is gone. The years of undersaving in his 20s cannot be recovered. The opportunity cost of those choices remains. That is the uncomfortable part of money. Some lessons arrive after the cheapest time to learn them has already passed. But that does not mean the story is finished, because not every problem is permanent. Some problems are simply ignored for too long, and once they are finally addressed, they stop being obstacles and start becoming opportunities. That's the only thing worth carrying with you. Not the number, not the guilt. Just as the decisions still open to you are still open. You can't reclaim the compound interest you missed in your 20s. You can't go back and unsign the form you never filled out. But the decision standing directly in front of you right now, the car you're thinking about financing, the raise you're scared to ask for, the automated transfer you keep meaning to set up, the insurance renewal sitting in your inbox, those are still yours. Every single one is a door that hasn't closed. Financial regret is fuel, nothing more. You're not supposed to carry it like a weight. Regret is only useful when it changes your next decision. Otherwise, it is just another expense you continue paying. You don't need to fix everything at once. The people who try to overhaul their entire financial life in a single weekend usually burn out and end up changing nothing. Pick one door, just one. The savings account transfer, the insurance comparison, the automatic investment setup you've been putting off. Do that one thing, and let the momentum build. Financial health, like physical health, is built on small, boring, repeated actions, not heroic one-time efforts. So do this. Not tomorrow, right now. While the discomfort is still sitting in your chest, pick one. The smallest, easiest, most embarrassingly simple door you've been walking past for months or years. The savings account paying you nothing. The subscription you forgot to cancel. The retirement contribution that hasn't moved in years. Pick one and fix it. Not because it will change your life today. Because it will teach your brain something more important. The door was never locked. It was just heavy. The past is a graveyard of expensive lessons. You've paid the invisible tax of being normal, and the receipt has been printed. But the part of a story that hasn't been written yet is entirely yours.